All right, Rich, can you take us back in time to 2002, or the decision before 2002 to say, hey, we're going to bring junior women's tournament to Fargo? What went into that process, and what was behind the scenes into that decision?
Well, I'll tell you what, the foundation of that decision was what had happened earlier, and that was women being added to the Olympic program for the 2004 games in Athens, and the commitment by the organization to go all in, jam their foot as hard as they could down on the gas to grow women's wrestling and add them to this spectacle, which we know as the Junior Cadet Nationals.
And that was really the formative stages of the developmental program and the national team staff, which I guess that predated, the hire of Terry Steiner. Was that right around the same time?
Well, that was around the same time. Obviously, Terry Steiner's been a foundation for the development of this program, competitively at the highest level, but certainly, hiring Terry Steiner was a bellwether event for women's wrestling.
When we look at this event itself, is a bellwether event. When in the first year, 2002, there were 103 girls. Today, 946 weighed in. When we added the tournament 20 years ago, did you think it would ever get this big?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know if anyone can say they thought it was going to get this big this quickly, but I'll tell you, we have goals and aspirations for this tournament to get even bigger, and to have the same number of participants and interests that we have on the boys and men's side.
Two athletes that won that first year in 2002 are here coaching. Melinda Ripley of California, Brandy Green now of South Carolina. That is an opportunity they have that the men have had for a long time. You go back to the 70s where the coaches, they wrestled here, they coach here, they wrestle here, they coach here, then their kids. What's it mean for you as the executive director of USA Wrestling to know that there is a generation of women's coaches that wrestled here and they're giving back and coaching here too?
Well, I'll tell you, I think it's the stamp of legitimacy on any program when you have athletes that have participated, understand clearly in the culture of the program to give back and to provide opportunities for the next generation. I think it's one of the things that one of our politicians said when he was inducted in the Wrestling Hall of Fame was, what makes America great? And he said it's the unbelievable commitment by parents to make the lives of their kids better than the life they had. And I think that holds true for wrestling. Those wrestlers that are committed to make the experience and their involvement in the sport that they had, make it better for the next generation, and that culture of giving back is really cool to see.
What do you think has kind of been the catalyst for growth? As you look at the numbers, it was 100, it peaked 200 for a little bit, and then it was always in the high 100s, and then it hit 300 in about 2015, and then in the last 7 years, it's tripled. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think it can be attributed to the fact that the infrastructure of our sport has removed all the barriers for girls to participate. At the early stages of women's wrestling, obviously, there were some that didn't necessarily agree that was the right direction for the sport. And I think what I'm most proud of and most happy and it makes my heart warm is to think about those barriers being eliminated now, and that the infrastructure that exists for wrestling is all in on women's wrestling.
When you see athletes like Melinda Ripley at her coach in California, Brandy Green with South Carolina, how does that make you feel when you say, they came through our program?
Well, I mean, those girls that you're mentioning are trailblazers, and hopefully they're the first of many that establish a culture of giving back. There's an expectation that when you've been touched by this sport, to give back and provide opportunities for others that come behind you to stand on your shoulders to participate in the sport. And I think, man, it's awesome to see, and I think it'll be the foundation by which this program will spring further forward.
You look at the performance of our national teams and Olympic teams. Helen made history in 2016. Again, bellwether moment. How much do you think her performance, winning an Olympic gold, impacted the numbers of this tournament?
Well, I mean, you don't have to talk to very many people to think that one of the integral parts of growth in a new sport is creating heroes, and have those heroes available for that generation of new wrestlers to aspire to be like. And certainly Helen, by winning the Olympic gold medal in the fashion she did, became an instant hero to literally thousands of young girls out there that now believe in the bottom of their belly that they can do the same thing.
And Tamira with the same type of impact on people of color. Talk about that.
Well, I mean, it's interesting about the common theme that we're discussing today are trailblazers, those that have broke through the barriers and just went on to accomplish great things. And Tamara is one of those trailblazers, right? She broke down a lot of barriers to persevere and fight for the right to be a wrestler, and now she's an Olympic champion and the hero of also thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of young women around the world.
We look at the world team in 2021. Of the 30, 10 are on the women's side, and all 10 from Oslo came through this tournament. 100% participation.
Well, I'm going to tell you, it speaks to the program, and I wish I could take credit for it. I can't. But, I mean, the infrastructure that exists at USA Wrestling for the sport of wrestling is pretty impressive. We can look every young member in the face and sincerely promise that they can achieve at the very highest level within the organization, participating in grassroots events, participating in national championships like the Junior Nationals, on to World Team Trials, and ultimately World and Olympic success, all done within a system and a structure that exists because of state chapters and volunteers in virtually every state that are working tirelessly to provide those opportunities. So it's about infrastructure, and it's a stamp on of approval on infrastructure when you see that happen.
But groups like the Women's Committee with Joan Fulp and Andrea Yamamoto and Sally's group of Wrestle Like a Girl, their impact on not just women's wrestling at the college and high school level, but of course, the grassroots level here.
Well, I'm going to tell you, they're impacting the sport, not just women's wrestling. I know sometimes we kind of paint a box around Joan Fulp and say, hey, she's really helping women's wrestling. Man, she's making the sport of wrestling better. We're learning from her, and she's not just about women's wrestling. She's about wrestling. She's the vice president of the organization, someone that is incredibly impactful in setting direction and creating innovative ideas by which we can grow the sport. So, I mean, we have a huge debt to pay to Joan Fulp for her involvement and her tireless efforts to move the sport forward. 20
years from now, how big do you think this women's tournament's going to be?
Well, it's funny, we talk a lot about efficiencies and limits, and I like to think that we should shy away from the kind of the deficit thinking of, hey, let's make things smaller so it's easier and shorter and less of a drain on things. Man, my goal would be to see this tournament be over 10,000 wrestlers and 5,000 girls in this tournament. So my dream would be we have 5,000 girls in this tournament in 20 years.
USA Wrestling's been ahead of the curve when it comes to the high school state associations and the college associations in its endorsement of women's wrestling and its financing of women's wrestling. How much do you think it's going to take the rest of the high school states that don't have it? How can they look to USA Wrestling in this tournament as to say, hey, the athletes are here, we just have to give them the opportunity?
Well, I think that's a cool thing about where we are, is that now those state chapters and associations that haven't recognized women's wrestling have to answer the question why, and as opposed to, hey, let's take a chance and try it, because the model's proven itself. The impact that making a commitment to women's wrestling at the high school level is, you can't argue with the impact that it's had. It's changed the lives of tens of thousands of young girls every day, and we know the history on the men's side, right? It's changed the lives of millions of young boys and men, and that opportunity should be the same for girls because it has the same impact. And Jason, you've heard me say it before, that I believe in the bottom of my belly, anybody that's participated and been involved in this sport is better, period. End of story.